welcome to In the Spread. I'm Captain Chad Bryson, and we're going to do another fly time video today. Got a new fly for you. A lot of people have been asking me, you've watched all of my videos, and I really appreciate that. And everywhere I go, I run into you guys at the Fish Hawk and out on the river and everywhere else. You're always asking me about deer hair, using deer hair for the heads of flies. And, that's one that I guess I've kind of kept a little close to the chest, so to speak. I use a lot of deer hair flies and always have. They give a lot of great action. But the truth of the matter is that I hate tying with deer hair because it's a pain and it makes a huge mess and it's hard and it's just how it is. But I got a fly here for you today called the Liberator, and it's a deer hair fly, deer hair head fly with marabou and schlappen and some polar chenille. It's nothing, just like all of my other flies, it's nothing super complicated. There's 5 materials that make this fly up, and just gives a lot of good action. And we're going to tie this one for you today step by step. Hope you enjoy it. All right, so we're going to tie the Liberator fly. And it's a really simple fly. It only has 5 materials that we use to make this fly with. And all of them, unlike some of my other flies, all of these materials are going to be available at just about any quality fly shop that you go to. All of your independent, privately owned shops are going to carry this stuff. We're going to use some polar chenille and copper. We're going to use cactus chenille, medium hot orange. We're going to use extra select marabou in yellow. We're going to use schlappen in yellow. And then deer body hair in yellow. And so the difference, we'll talk on this for just a minute, the difference in the deer body hair and deer belly hair, everybody asks, well, okay, which one should I use? Should I use belly hair? Should I use body hair? And the answer is that it really just depends on what results you want. If you use the belly hair, then the hair fibers themselves are not as mottled as this. You see it's got some black in there and everything. The belly hair is the white hair off of the deer, and so when they dye it, when it goes through and gets dyed, it's a more solid color yellow. I happen to like the mottled look to make the heads with, so I use the body hair. If I were tying a musky fly or something that I wanted a solid color, like this in chartreuse with the belly hair, you see how the difference is between the modeling of the two. No modeling, lots of modeling. So first we're going to start with the Gamakatsu B10S stinger hook in size 1/0, and this is going to be the rear hook. So we're going to lay down a little bit of thread. I'm using the gel spun thread because it doesn't build up very much. I'm going to pick out some schlappen. So, one of my buddies that ties some big streamers, he and I were talking the other day about, here lately the quality of the schlappen we've been getting has not really been that great, to tell you the truth. And, and you'll go through time periods where you go to the shop and you pick out a pack of schlappen, and you got to sort through the whole thing looking for a couple of feathers that are going to work. And you can see this one is no exception. There's some pretty ratty looking feathers through here. So, for my $7 that I paid for this pack, I'm really only going to be able to get about 3, maybe 4 flies. So I'm going to look for a good feather. It's going to make a nice tail. That one's not going to work because it's got a lot of marabou type feathers down here at the bottom. We want to use the webby fibers out at the end of the hackle. So pick us out a couple. Maybe I can find some. It's a brand new pack. There's one. That one's going to work. That one's not. This one will work. So we'll start with that. So you see what I'm doing here to make the tail. I'm going to go down here where the web meets the marabou, and I'm just going to pull it back. As TK and Mike used to say, I'm going to skin it back. Bunch of kids watching this video don't even know who TK and Mike are. So I'm going to pick this out, lay my feather in, kind of look at it back here, measure it out. If my voice sounds a little scratchy, it's because it's January in Atlanta and I got a cold, and that's just how it is. So if you hear me coughing, wheezing, sounding bad, that's all it is. I'm not dying yet. All right, so we've got that one laid in there. Remember, this is how I always cup the feathers on the tail so that they're facing each other. So the next one that I lay in, I'm going to make it concave to the other one, if I can find another good feather. That one will work. And of course, I found a good one and I broke it off too short. And again, this one would be the right length and the right shape, but it's got all this marabou down at the bottom that we don't want to use for a tail. Because the reason you don't want to use it is because it affects the way the fly swims. So I can tell you that Hairline has done a terrible job on selecting schlappen for this pack. All right, we're going to make this one work. So I'm going to lay it up, measure it. All right, so this feather's going in concave to the other one. It's not my first choice, but it's going to work. And sometimes that's all you get, and you just got to make them work. All right, so they're laid in. After it gets in the weather or in the water, it's going to lay out and match up pretty nice and give it some good swimming action. So next thing we'll use is some extra select marabou. And the big thing we get with the extra select marabou is that you get the longer fibers. And just like in schlappen, all marabou is not created equal. And so in each pack of marabou, even though you're buying extra select off the shelf, you still kind of have to go through and pick out the feathers, the right feathers that you want. And so one that you don't want, always go through at the top of the feather, run my finger over it and see how far down the stem it'll bend. So I can, if I go down here, I can make it bend a long way, but I really want it to bend really easily for a long way down. That's going to make it easier to palmer and wrap in. So this one's going to wrap a little bit longer, and I don't want a whole lot back here at the back. All I'm doing is setting up a tail, just making a wrap. Man, they've got these sewn together like crazy. So I'm going to use this one. I'm going to grab it by the tip. Tie it in. You can either trim it or just break it, and it's fine. So now I want to start palmering this in. I don't want to do too many wraps here. I just want to do enough to kind of cover over where I've tied in the schlappen feathers for the tail. Keep pulling the barbs back, making it wrap nice and clean. That's really all I need. So, you can check it and see. You know what? I can go one more. I can go one more, make it look nice. Biggest thing about palmering marabou, making these big streamers, is you just got to be patient. And that's truthfully probably why most of my flies are not that technical and complicated, because I just want them to work. I want them to swim right. I want them to catch fish, and I want them to be durable. So that's going to work. So I'm going to finish that out. Wrap it around. All right, so now all I've really done is just built a little collar over the back of the tail. Really serves no other purpose than to just look good. So another question I get a lot is, how come I don't use a lot of flash? And you know, any of my flies you could convert very easily, and from trophy brown trout flies into musky flies. And so what I've found, though, in certain times, and depending on the color combinations that I'm using, this polar chenille will actually add a nice subtle little bit of flash inside the marabou, so that you just don't have a solid piece of marabou coming through. Your end result is going to look like this, where you just got a little bit of flash showing on the insides of the marabou just to offset it. So I'm just going to clip a small piece of this. So when I lay this up, the polar chenille, you kind of got to babysit it a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit wieldy to work with in some regards. But when you lay it in, you want the polar chenille fibers to be standing up. Lay it in at the tip. Go ahead, tie it in. You twist this around however you like, but you want the barbs to be laying back towards the tail of the fly. And again, you just kind of got to babysit it as you wrap it through. There's 1, 2, 3. Finish it out, and you're all set. And so now you got just a little bit of a base there. So you got feather, feather, flash, which is really not too different than any musky fly combination that you're going to do. And a lot of you already know that's where I get a lot of my inspiration for these trout flies, is off of musky flies. You just either tone them down a little bit or you tone them up. You just modify them. And a lot of you guys are going to be sitting there watching this video thinking, well, I could do this, I could do that, I could change this fly up, I could do whatever I want to do with it. And that's great. I hope you do, because that's what all of us do. There's nothing that I'm doing here that someone else hasn't already done. So next thing I want to do, though, is now I'm going to start adding a little more marabou on the hook shank here. And so instead of the marabou laying down, you want the marabou to flare up a little bit, and you want it to stand up a little bit like I got it doing on this one. So what I like to use for that is this cactus chenille, because it builds a dubbing ball. And and if you're a traditional guy and you want to tie traditional, then sure, you could get some dubbing and make a dubbing loop and wax it all in and build yourself a dubbing ball, and that's fine, and it serves the same purpose and it works. But I don't have that much patience. I want this done so that I can go fishing and so that I can move on to the next thing. And so I find that the cactus chenille really works to go a little bit faster, and it provides the same outcome in the end. So I'm going to lay this in, tie it up. Hold your polar chenille back out of the way. All right, and I'm just going to build a dubbing ball. is all I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap this stuff over itself. And it actually uses a good bit of material. To build the dubbing ball. So we're going to go with about that much. I don't know how many wraps that is. I don't ever count it. I just do what feels natural. All right, so that's tied off. So now we're going to select another piece, hopefully another good piece of extra select marabou. Check it, that's actually a really good one. Hold it up by the tip. Got her all tied in. So hold it up. There's that. So we'll start that one over. That's going to happen. The life of fly tying is not always fair and easy. Alright, so we'll pull these barbs back. This one's a little bit screwy, and that's fine. I'm going to show you how to fix that in the end. You see how these barbs are wanting to stick forward here, lay forward no matter how I'm holding the marabou. Great thing about marabou is that it's forgiving, and you can make it do what you want it to do after the fact. Babysit it along, pull the barbs back. I can tell you right now that I don't like the looks of this at all. And so this is a critical point in your fly. See how these barbs are all clustered together and they're wanting to stick to my dubbing ball? This is a huge problem. So when you're tying along, and I mean this legit just happened to me, when you're tying and you start seeing this and you have all this stuff going on here that just looks like a messy mop, that's going to make your fly look like a messy mop. There's nothing about this that looks like this. So this goes back to where I was talking about all marabou is not created the same, and this piece is horrible. So I'm going to pitch that in the trash, take that out, and start over with another piece. And if I have to, I'll even go to another pack of marabou. And now it looks like I'm going to have to because there are no other good pieces in this pack. So everybody wants to know, how come you got so much fly tying material? Why does it take so much? Why do you have so much? This is why. So when I go to the Fish Hawk to buy stuff for fly tying, I always buy 4 and 5 packs of everything. We'll get a shot of everything over here on my table and you'll see it's a ridiculous amount of stuff. But in order to get a fly and in order to get the materials that you want, sometimes that's what it takes. So that one's pretty good. All of those basically suck. So we'll go to the third pack of extra select marabou. All right, this one has promise. There it is. That one's a good one. It just fell right out in my hand. So you see the difference here in how fine the barbs are on this piece of marabou as opposed to these, where it's got all this serious webbing down here at the bottom. Not to say that this is a useless feather. You can use that for a whole lot of things, just not what I'm wanting it for today. Yep, there we go. Keeps breaking. So when your material keeps breaking, in order to get what you want, you got to use a little bit more of the barbs to get it down there. Tie it in nice and tight so that it'll stay. All right, I'm just pulling it back, palmering it in. This one's going to work fine. I'm just wrapping it until I get the desired effect that I'm looking for. And all I'm really looking for is coverage over the whole hook shank, nice and even across the body of the whole fly. That's really all I want. That's all I'm looking for. So there, I've got that. Hold it all back. Tie it in. I'm going to tie it in almost all the way to the dubbing ball. And so you see we went through all of that to get one wrap. But that's how it goes. That's why these flies take so long to tie. That's how come there's so much involved with the material. So here again, I got the marabou laid down. It's going to be time for another piece of polar chenille to tie in. Pull the fibers back towards the tail of the fly. Start wrapping. And you can wrap this as many times as you want or as few times as you want. You know, some people don't even want to use it at all, and that's fine. It just depends on what your river system will take. You know, on the Chattahoochee River here in Atlanta, most of the time a whole lot of flash scares away the big brown trout. You know, which kind of goes against everything that, you know, we think about with brown trout, but you know, basically they just don't like it. You know, for whatever reason, they just decide that they don't. They're kind of fickle when it comes to that stuff. So that's going to be about enough. I'm going to hold that over, trim it. Pull my fibers back. Wrap that. Now, I could, depending on what profile I want here, I could put another dubbing loop or another dubbing ball or a Staz ball or chenille ball right here, whatever you want to call it. The vocabulary and terminology is up to you. I really don't care what you call it, as long as you find something that works. But you could put another one in right here if you want a bigger profile at this end of the fly. I don't like to, because this is the tail of the fly, and so we're trying to make a fish here, something that's in a fish body shape. And so I like it to kind of flatten out a little bit more here towards the back. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to find another piece of marabou, make a few more wraps, and then we're going to finish out this rear hook. There we go. There's a good one. All right, so I found a good one there. See if I can tie this one in without breaking it. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to palmer this in. Now you got to kind of hold back the polar chenille as you wrap it around. I'm going to wrap this one several times because I got a lot of space to cover. And basically I just want that, I want that look. I want that look of having a lot of marabou here near to the front of this hook. This is going to give you a lot of action. At the rear of the fly, which is going to make the tail swim and make fish eat. So we're going to go with that. When I get done with this rear hook, I'm going to talk about this new bobbin that I'm using. My buddy Rob Smith at the Fish Hawk turned me on to this new bobbin. Said that I was really going to like it, and that I needed to be open to change and change some of my tools to use better stuff. And so I took his advice, and you know, as luck would have it, he was right. What do those guys know? All right, so we're going to finish this out. A little zap a gap. There we go. All right, so we're going to let that dry, clean it up just a touch. So this is the new bobbin that I'm using. It's the Right bobbin, and they got a pretty cool little slogan there, only a spider has better thread control. But the truth is that, and it's expensive, you can see there, $37.50 retail, but the truth is that it is easily the best bobbin I've ever used for tying, and especially the bigger streamers. You want the longer neck on it to keep your stuff out of the way, you know, your hands out of the way of what you're making. So between the gel spun and the bobbin, easily the best tool I've ever made or ever used. So Rob Smith, good job, buddy. You did your job and you convinced me to change my tools. So write this one down. All right, so I'm going to take this one out, take the rear fly out, lay it down. Now we're going to go to the front fly. This is the part, again, where in the articulated flies where everybody kind of gets a little intimidated, and there's a whole lot of opinions out there. And when I say there's a lot of opinions, I mean there's a lot of opinions about how you attach the rear fly to, or the rear hook to the front hook. So again, I'm using Gamakatsu B10S size 2/0 is going to be my front hook. And the reason I use the 2/0 on the front is because I just want a little bit longer hook shank to add the material, and especially the deer hair. The deer hair is the most aggravating part of this fly next to how you attach the rear hook. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of opinions out there on what product or what material to use to attach the rear fly to the front hook, or the rear hook to the front hook. I've always used monofilament. I got a couple of flies, some of my smaller flies that I use wire. Wire works. And you know what? You could use wire on this fly, no problem. I've never once said that don't use wire. All I'm saying is that I use monofilament, and it just so happens that I've used monofilament because that's what I've always had readily available whenever it came time for me to sit down and start trying to figure out how to make an articulated fly. You know, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. we don't really have a whole lot of wire laying around here that you can go and get in the middle of the night. And that's what happens to me is I wake up 1 o'clock in the morning and I got an idea for something that I want to try, and I have to try it right then so that I can see if the idea is going to work or not. So it's always been monofilament for me. And what this is 50 pound. It's nothing expensive, nothing extravagant. In fact, I think I bought this at the most hated chain store in America, but yet we all shop there because you can get what you need. I'm not going to spool up any fishing rods or fishing reels with this. This is 50 pound monofilament. It's strong, it's durable, and you know what else? It's cheap and available. So I'm going to use a piece of that, and I'm going to lay this in, and you know, I had a guy ask me the other day, how do I keep the monofilament from twisting? And it's a great question, because if you just lay it in on top of itself, your rear hook's going to twist, and it's going to wind up running sideways like this. So the way to keep them running straight, like so, I'm going to show you the way I do it. I lay this in on the bottom of the hook shank, and I'll take a couple of wraps just to kind of hold it in place, like so. Got a couple of wraps now. I've snugged it down, and it's snugged down on the bottom, just like that. And as I wrap this, I'm going to keep this on the bottom of the hook shank all the way up. And if you wrap it good and tight, the monofilament compresses. So see, I could stop, in theory, I could stop wrapping right there, and I'm pulling my vise up off of the floor, off of the table. It's wrapped in there so tight. I'm going to wrap it on up just a little bit more, just popped up there. Hold it down. Wrap it up just a little bit more to about right there is plenty. Trim it. All right, so just brought up a good point here. You know, see how I've got this mono turned around? Should I have laid it in so that the mono, the natural bend, is facing the other way? If your OCD kicks in and you feel like that's what you need to do, I am certainly not going to argue with you over it. However, when I turn this around and lay it up under on the other side, after I've got my beads on and everything, it's going to lay in there just right, just the way that we want it. So, I'm going to put the beads on. I'm using the Sea Striker beads, and because I'm tying a yellow fly, I'm using green, just because I don't want too much, excuse me, I don't want too much brightness from underneath with the red beads that I use on the double deceiver. So I got my two threaded on. Now I'm going to thread on my rear hook. All right, so here we go. Got this guy on there. So the purpose of the beads, somebody else asked me the other day as well, you know, why do you use the beads? Why wouldn't you just make a loop? Why wouldn't you just make a loop with the monofilament and be done with it? You know, simplify your life. Why are you using so many materials? On and on and on. The reason you use the beads is so that when you're casting and you make a bad cast, and come on, let's admit it, everybody makes a bad cast. Some of us do more than others. At this point in my life and career, I make more bad casts than I make good casts because I guide more than I fish. So, but the point is that when you make that bad cast, the fly can only come around so far, and the beads prevent it from coming off from the rear hook, coming around and hooking on itself. So that's what they do. So you see how I've got this piece of mono, It's split the difference here on the hook, and I'm holding it, I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm holding it down underneath, same as where I was holding the other piece of mono, and this guy is not going to twist. It's right there, all set, ready to go. So I'm going to wrap around, holding it with my right hand. I'm going to hold it in place with my right hand while I make a wrap with my left. And this is the other thing I like about this right bobbin. It's a little bit heavier than the standard ceramic tips that I've been using. And so after I make a wrap, I can let it hang and it'll actually hold the material in place by itself. So again, Rob Smith, you win. All right, so I got enough started there. I can change hands, holding it in the right spot. Okay, so now I've got enough wraps on there that I can step back, take a look at what I got going on, make sure I'm not about to mess up. Everything looks right, nothing wants to twist. There's no twisting going on at all, so I'm going to trim out the front of this. Wrap it up to the front. Check it again. Now, this is another critical part. As I start wrapping it to the back, see, I'm cranking on it pretty tough. My vise is moving. So I'm cranking on it to the back here, and if you wrap too far this way into the monofilament, you'll tighten everything up, and your rear hook won't swim. So you want to come back, and all I do is I just wrap and check. Make sure I'm not going too far. So that's about the limit right there. Just pull my vise, so I'm going to probably have to readjust the camera here, so you guys just hang with us for a second. Okay, so we got everything adjusted here. So I'm all set. Everything works, everything swims. So now I'm going to start building the materials on the front hook, and I'm going to start out first by laying in a dubbing ball or a chenille ball, whatever you want to call it. A little bit of the cactus chenille. You know, somebody asked me, you're using a rotary vise, you're using a Dynaking Barracuda rotary vise. How come you don't use the rotary feature when you're making your dubbing balls or chenille balls to hold the materials up? And you certainly could do that and use that rotary feature, which would mean that I would just hold the material and wrap this around like so. And you could do that, but I don't feel like I get as much control over the product that I'm trying to tie in there when I do it that way. So now here's a game of a crapshoot. We're going to try and find a good piece of marabou to tie in. There we go. That's a good one. This was a good pack. All right, we're just palmering this in, just like we've done on all the other ones. Again, I'm just going to lay this in, keep wrapping until I get the desired effect that I'm looking for. I think we're about there. This one's a little thick, but it's going to be all right. All right, now this is it's a little bit webby. So one thing you can do just to see what you got. So I'm going to use this brush. It's just a stiff bristle brush. I'm not going to grind on this thing and really wail on it. I'm just going to comb it, brush it just a little bit to make sure that I don't have anything wrapped up. Make sure that I got, see, there you go. Got a little bit of wrappage there. It doesn't look right. So I'm just going to fix that. This is where your rotary vise comes in really handy. Everybody wanted to see me use the rotary feature? Here you go. Okay, it's going to work fine. All right, back to the same process. Polar chenille. I know this is incredibly exciting to watch me do the same things over and over and over again, but that is the nature of making these flies. Polar chenille, hold the fibers back. Now on this one, I'm probably going to put a little bit more flash in than I have previous, because this would be, in theory, this would be the middle body of the fly. So, this is going to be the part right behind the gill plates of the fish, of the bait fish, of whatever you're fishing. So if you were going to have a spot on the fly that you wanted a little bit more flash, this would be it. So come on, lay out there. And I'm holding all the fibers back. I'm going back just a little bit. That way it all lays down nice and tight. Okay. So now we're going to do a little bit more chenille. Maybe we can get one more good piece of marabou. That would be great. All right, got a good piece, and it broke. Just got a good piece, and I broke. You know, I should probably stop going to the gym if I keep breaking this marabou. This marabou is so strong, and I'm so powerful. Okay, we're just wrapping this in until you get the amount that you want. It doesn't matter if you wrap it in forward, backward, reverse. It doesn't matter, because when you cinch it down with the thread, those barbs of marabou are going to lay in there the way the thread wants them to. All right, we're going to call this one good. Okay. So that's just about right. Lots of chicken floating around in the air. All right, so I'm going to do like one more little wrap of polar chenille. Not too much, just one little tiny wrap, just to make a collar. And so I know what everybody's thinking. You're like, man, it's awful tight for the deer hair head. You got enough room. And the truth is that you're gonna it's gonna work that way. You just sometimes you're gonna hit it better than others. You know, with the amount of room that you have left, and you always got to be aware of that. This is going to be enough room, because believe it or not, I'm not really using a whole lot of deer hair. A little bit goes a long way. So just wrap that. That's one. Wrap it around here and finish it. See, I don't really want much laying up there. Now, the great thing with this gel spun is you can wrap it back like that. It doesn't build up a whole lot. So now I've still got enough room, not as much room as would be practically ideal as I'd left on this fly, but it's still going to be well more than enough to make my deer hair head. I'm just going to have to go through the process a little bit at a time. So now we're going to do the deer hair, and honestly, this is the part that I dread the most, is the deer hair, because you lay the deer hair on, you tie it on, and you got this huge clump, and then you got to start trimming it. And it makes a great fly with a lot of great action, but this is the hardest and most technical part. So you can see what I got going on here. You can see where I've been trimming out of this clump of hair. But you don't want to grab a whole lot. It's just kind of like working with bucktails on the double deceiver. You know, a little bit goes a long way. You got to use enough so that you got enough material to make a head. But if you use too much, you're really just kind of backing up. So we're going to use about this much. I'm going to rub the guard hairs out of that, the under fur, everything all the way out. I'll lay this down there. So I've wrapped around the clump of deer hair 3 times. Now I'm just going to pull it tight, just like so. And because I had to do that around that piece of thread and material, I'm just going to kind of help it around with my hands instead of it spinning. I'm just going to kind of help it around a little bit with my hands, make it spin completely. This is a great part of the rotary vise, is you can spin it and check it. And it's pretty good. Help it a little bit more. There we go. Now she's spun. So you say, wow, okay, well, that really worked out. And it did. Worked out great. Spun all the way around. I'm just going to kind of even it out. I want a little more of it on the top than the bottom. So it's spun all the way around. Then what you have to do, make sure that your vise is secure and make sure that your hook point is down there, because I promise you, those hook points are sharp, but you got to pack in this deer hair and get it in there good and tight. You press it back against the materials back here that you've already tied. Tighten her up. Bring it in. All right, so you see I don't have much room left, but I promise you I've still got enough room to tie in another piece of deer hair. Enough to make the head out of anyway. So I'm just going to grab another piece out of here. All right, 1, 2, 3. Just want to even it out, make it look nice and even. This is the part that makes the stuff so aggravating. There's some guys out there, some great fly tyers, that work with deer hair all the time on all of their flies, and they're absolutely masters at it. I'm not going to claim in any way that I'm a master at this. I'll be the first to tell you that some of my deer hair flies turn out and look awesome, and some of them are less than awesome. And that's just the nature of working with deer hair. Unless you're working with it every day, it's a tough material to work with. But if you're patient enough and you're willing to put in the time and spend the money in materials, it's not that expensive. A pack of deer hair here, or body hair, is $2.95. So, if you're willing to work with it, you can make it go a long way, and you can really teach yourself pretty quickly. So that's going to be enough. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is going to be a time that I'm going to use the actual whip finishing tool so that I can get in here to finish this out. That's not going to work. it's done, I'm just going to put a little drop of glue in there. Later on, I'll have to dab that out of the eye of the hook, but that's enough that it'll hold everything tight. All right, so check this, spin it around. Yeah, that's more than enough deer hair to make the head that I want it to have. This is I've talked about the aggravating part of deer hair, and we just did that. So now we're going to cover the fun part of deer hair. So the fun part of the deer hair is that you can trim it to whatever shape you want it to be. I've kind of got this one trimmed into a cone shape, which kind of helps with the swimming action of the bait, because all of my big flies, I really just kind of want them to look like a swim bait, you know, that you would fish for muskie or largemouth bass or anything that's going to, or stripers or anything that's going to eat another fish. And that's kind of how I trim them out and make them do. But, you know, you can leave this head blocky and round. You can make it square. Great part about the deer hair is you can make it however you want it to be to achieve the effect that you want. And it's really fun, and it's great to experiment, and there's a lot of different options. I personally like the cone shape, and that's what I'm going to trim it into. So this tool that I'm using is really nothing more than a razor blade. You know, it's Wilkinson razor blades. You can get them at any fly shop. And a lot of guys actually hold the razor blade by their hand to bend it. You can see how flexible it is there. A lot of guys will hold it. I kind of like the tool because, again, I have trouble with the deer hair anyway, so I'll take any cheating aspect that I can. And so all you do to trim the deer hair, this is where the mess comes in. I'm going to lock my vise down. And again, I just want to do a cone shape. And you start by doing just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. Because you can always take more off, but you can't put more back on. So this head is going to wind up looking a little bit different than the one that I just showed you, and that's okay, because it's going to give it a little bit different action. It may swim a little bit differently. Every fly is a little different, and you know, everybody knows that there's that one fly that you tie where all the stars and moon and everything else are aligned, and that one fly is the magical combination of everything, where you just got every single aspect of it exactly right. And so to go through your box and say, oh, well, this one isn't going to work because it doesn't look like this one, is a terrible idea, because how else are you going to know what really works and what doesn't? So I'm going to leave this one just for the purposes of demonstration, and because I'm curious about it, I'm going to leave the head on this one a little bit big. You see, I'm not grinding down in there. I'm just gently trimming this deer hair. And this is where the rotary vise comes in really handy. So you can turn it around, see what you're doing. So looking at it in all angles, the most important part, no matter what shape you choose to leave the head of your fly in, it does need to be even. You know, you want it to be uniform. So I'm going to leave this one kind of big, and this one's pretty well uniform. So that's it. That's the Liberator fly. I'll lay this other one up just as a comparison. You can see how the head shape is completely different. It's got the same features, same aspects. But you can, you know, and what I'll do later on, after I take this fly out and fish it and see how it swims, if it doesn't swim good and it doesn't have the right action, then I'll come back in, put it in the vise, and get my tool out and trim it again. You know, so take off just a little bit at a time, because you can always cut more off, but it's tough to add any back. Actually, it's impossible to add any back on after the fly is done and completed. So there it is. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, guys, I really appreciate all your support and appreciate hearing from you. And thanks for watching the videos. If you got any questions about anything, you can always contact me through In the Spread, or you can find me at chadbrysonfishing.com. So that's it. That was the Liberator fly, and really enjoyed sharing that with you guys. I hope you guys tie it. I hope you change it. I hope you manipulate it around to make it your own a little bit, or just fish it like I do, which is simple and stupid. But you can see I'm covered in scraps of material. It's quite a messy job, but I really appreciate you guys watching the videos, and I appreciate all the responses and interaction that I get with you. Like I was talking about before, when I was going through packs and packs of marabou trying to find just a handful of feathers at work, you can see behind me there's a whole lot of crap back here. I've got thousands and thousands of dollars worth of fly tying materials, and it's only because you never know how many packs of marabou and schlappen and everything else that you're going to have to go through to find the right feathers. So when you go to your fly shop, go to your privately owned fly shops, the ones that you can go in and talk to somebody that's knowledgeable behind the counter about, I need extra select marabou that's really flexible so that I can make a lot of palmered wraps with it. Talk to them about what you're doing. You're going to get that service at your independently owned fly shops more so than a chain store. Not that you can't go in a chain or some corporate sweater vest store to buy your stuff. You could. I'm just not recommending it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it.